Hi, Josh here. Today I'm going to show you how to cut a box joint, the joints here, using glue up instead of cutting the fingers, without cutting your fingers. So it's going to be a glue up box joint rather than a cutting box joint. So to do that, this is an example I made. You can see I cut strips that are all the same width all the way around, and then I alternated the glue up so these two stick out farther this way and these three stick out farther this way, and in the end they all fit together because they're all the same width, if that makes sense, hopefully. So to do that, I made a little jig. I'm gonna make a little jig, and to do that, I wanted to I'm cutting my pieces. So in this case, here's one of the sides, and it would be alternated like this. So I'm going to make, if your box is going to be square, you're going to make 16 of these pieces. If you're making it rectangular, you'd make two sides like this and two sides longer or shorter, however you want to do it. And the part that is finicky is getting this gap the same level across, because if you put these together, if you have two of these put together, here it is, and they're going to glue up like this. Once we're done, we'll be able to glue these up. And if you don't have these aligned, you could have a gap. It could be all messed up. So we want to make sure these gaps are the same. And it's hard, you can't just eye it, and you can't really put a thing across it. So I came up with, based on a YouTube video I saw, you're going to make a couple cross pieces for the ends, and then you're going to make pieces that are as long as your board, plus however the thickness of your boards are. So that plus the thickness. So you can see that's about like that. So when I put them together, I actually made them just slightly longer because it's a lot easier to sand off something slightly longer than too short. So here's our cross pieces, and I'm going to put them together. I don't know if you want to come over here so you can see the angle a little bit better, but so you would have to make one of these jigs for every size panel you want to make. So in the end, it'll look kind of like this. And to do it, I'm going to have a couple spacers so that when we make it, take our 4 and we'll line them up. I have to glue these and nail them together first, but I just wanted to show you once we get it in. That way 2 or however many pieces, you could do this with 20 pieces if you wanted, as long as it's wide enough this way. And you would glue these up, and that way right now this side is holding these straight flush and this side is holding these straight flush. That way you have nice planes to be able to glue into. So let's put this thing together. Super simple. As long as you have, as long as you're square. So if you've used a chop saw set at 0 or 90 degrees, these can be super precise. So speed square, you come in and check, make sure that my pieces are totally square. But before I do that, I'm just gonna make a little mark on where I'm gonna glue them. I'm gonna put these all the way to the ends. That way, if I make something bigger eventually with these little pieces, I have a longer jig to be able to make bigger boxes. So I'm just making a little mark where I want my glue. So I can see 4 little spots where I want glue. There we go. Little glue on each of them. And because this is plywood and they're a butt joint, which just means like that. If you have an end thing like this, plywood has a little bit more side grain, but you wanna use a mechanical fastener like a nail or a screw. So kind of like this. I mean, I could just clamp them up right now, make sure they're square. Like I said, I think this one is slightly off that way. Make sure it's square this way, perfect. Check all your corners. Oh. Like that. So at this point I could just clamp it, wait for it to dry enough. Another way I can do it, which I kind of like, the quick tricky way, is this is a super thin cyanoacrylate glue, I think it's called. It's instant adhesive, is super glue. I like to just put a little bit in the joints, and this helps things stick together. And then what is this? Rapid set. Basically, you spray it onto super glue, and it makes it cure, instant cure. This one's almost out, so hopefully I have enough. So hopefully I had enough glue in there, and those should all be set. And then the wood glue that I put in earlier, I could have just done that with super glue, but the wood glue makes it a little bit better of a bond. So you can kind of see that it's already set. They're probably not super strong joints until that glue sets, and I get my mechanical fasteners in there. So right now I'm going to get a nail gun, but you can do, this is a brad nailer. You can do the same thing with, just little finish nails, or you could screw it with a screw gun. If you do a screw gun, especially with plywood, you're going to want to pre-drill, because if you don't, it'll just split this plywood right up. So I'm just going to put a couple in each here. All right, so that side should be good. Flip it over. All right, so I think my gun's kind of been misfiring, so I'm gonna there we go. Make sure I'm getting all the nails in there. I'm going to show you how to do, if you don't have a brad nailer like I do, you can also use these. Oh, these are too big. I'll just show you one. So finish nail, probably smaller, 1.5 inches. These are about 2 inches. What I like to do with these is get a hammer. I like to keep the hammers on the floor, apparently. And then set it on concrete or something strong. And then the pointy end, you see that? I like to just lightly kind of smush over the end. And if I do that, and then I can drive it into the wood, it's a lot less likely to split, because these ends are made into wedges, which wedges like to split wood. But if I dull the end a little bit, it actually tears the fibers as it goes through, and it helps keep things from splitting. We'll see if that was enough. But yep. So made it all the way through, no splitting. Let me just show you what it looks like to drive it without doing it, and I'll see if I can find a piece of plywood. Here we go. So pretended that's kind of what I just did. There's a possibility it won't split, but it's more likely. It made it. But a lot of times if I did that without dulling the end, this whole thing, because of the way they're glued together, would just split right in half. So, and that's true with these too. Let me give you one of these. It's probably, maybe even more true for solid wood like this. So I'm just gonna do the end. Let's see. It's going in funky, but so you see how it kind of split open there? So I don't think that would have happened quite so much if I had dulled the end. Anyway, so once we have this set, lay it down. I have a couple spacers, like I said earlier, to put underneath my glue ups. Lay out my pieces, and I want to make sure they're alternating. And depending on the face you want to be out or in, you're going to want to make sure you alternate the opposite direction if you want a certain face to be out. You just kind of have to manipulate that through your head. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take a pencil and I'm going to mark where they line up at the moment. That way when I glue, I know I don't need to glue this little tab. I'm just going to kind of run some glue. Use a little spreader, get it nice and even. Because I don't want, actually, if I have a lot of glue on this end, it's not going to be good because glue will interfere with when I glue these panels together, which would just be a lot more cleanup. So as long as you have enough glue on one piece, you could probably skip to the next one. I forgot to mark this one. All right. So glue, and this one, mark it. You can kind of see how I'm spreading the glue with. You can use paper, you can use your finger, whatever. I just like these pieces of scrap because I got a billion of them, and they're nice and flat, so it makes a nice straight edge. And any glue you get on the sides, you probably want to get as much off as you can now, because it's just something you have to clean up later if you don't. Oh, and make sure my joint doesn't have any glue in it. So I actually wipe off just a little bit toward the end. So once this gets clamped together, it'll probably squeeze out a little bit toward that direction anyway. All right, one more. So you're going to end up doing this 4 times. And you can either make 4 jigs, just make sure they're all the right size, or you can just do it one at a time and wait about an hour between making the jigs. So you can see I left that little space clean, glued up like that. And now this is where hopefully you all have some clamps that are wide enough for that. So I have some glue there. Hopefully I've got some clamps wide enough. Whether or not I know where they are is another question. Here we go. So for something this small, probably 3 should be long enough. My good old Harbor Freight bar clamps. I'm not doing thousands of pounds, so should be good. These are pretty cheap. And like they say, you can never have too many clamps. One thing also you may want to consider is putting a clamp block across the top like this, and clamping both sides. That way these won't slide out up or down. I'm not going to worry too much about it right now, but make sure these are all clamped to the edges. So you have them, start one in the middle. Smooth. Come on. Leave myself some room here. There we go. All right, so there should be, if I have enough glue, there should be just the tiniest little bit of squeeze out. I'm gonna kind of hold it down. Wiping off. You can get a wet cloth too and wipe off most of this glue on the outside before it dries, and that makes it a little easier. All right, so now that I'm in good spot, I'm actually going to pull it out, flip it over, as long as that's tight enough so nothing moves around. Kind of wipe these off. I had a wet cloth, it'd probably be better, but there we go. I like to alternate my clamps side to side so that if one is putting pressure on it to make it want to go this way, the other pressure kind of makes it go the other way. So it just kind of evens out the pressure. And 3, for this size, 3 should be enough. I don't know, every 2 or 3 inches. Like I said, we don't have to do a million pounds, but we want to make sure when we're done that we still have a plane, like this board is all in one plane, and we can check. I might have to, so if I take a straight edge, nice straight edge, go like that, I can see it's got a tiny gap on this end, so it looks to me it's probably close enough because I can sand out most of that stuff. I'm not too worried about it. Let's just check it over on the other side. Yeah, you can see how there's a little bit of a low spot on this end. I don't know if you can see that little gap right there. So probably not too big a deal, but if I wanted to fix that, I could take my things like this. Actually, just run them one on each side. These are called clamping cauls. There we go, a couple more. So hopefully you got some clamps. They're important. So I got different lengths. Like I said, I think these are, I don't know, $5 or something at Harbor Freight. Harbor Freights are most places. Not the highest of quality, but they work plenty good for what I'm doing here. So as long as I've given myself enough room. Need 4 hands here. All right. So this should bring everything back into clean. And I could do 2 batches of these. When you do it though, make sure that you don't have lots of glue in these glue outs, or put a piece of paper between this and your clamping caul so that they don't get glued together, which that makes it a little bit messy. So I'm just going to leave it at that, but you could do another one here if you feel like it's not flat. To me, it looks pretty flat. Yeah, that's a lot better. I don't know if you can see. It's pretty much straight across. So then we just let it sit. This type of glue takes, I don't know, hour, depending on the temperature. But as long as it's over 60 degrees or so, we should hour and a half, 2 hours maximum. And then you can take the clamps off and do the next thing. Like right now, I've got that all set up. I could make my second batch. I ended up using my little spacers, but I can use different spacers. So once I do this again, these are shorter, so this wouldn't be the right jig for these, because you can see how big this gap is. I only want my gap to be as big as the thickness of one of these boards. So I would have to make a new one of these. But if I'm making a box, I want 2 the size of this, or 4 the size of that, and 2 the size that would make it so these are. Another thing I probably could do, because these are pretty darn close, I could put a little gap here and see if that's the right. Oh, look at that. I'm brilliant. So I have a little spacer, and that's thickness, same thickness all the way through. So I'm just going to do that. So I got it lined up. Same thing. Once I get these glued up, I will show you kind of how they go together. To make a box. I'll make half a box for you. All right. And this jig can be made from basically anything. You can use plywood, you could use your scraps from your whatever you cut off to make the boxes. As long as they're stiff enough, they're not going to bend around a bunch when you're putting stuff together. So as long as you're good with that, and they should be square. Whoop, a little bit extra there. All right. Boom. Grab some more clamps. And this one might only need 2. It's a little bit shorter. Okay. Get some squeeze out there. That's good. Wipe that off. Sometimes you want to wipe as you go because your clamps will start getting in your way. I think I am going to do 3 just so I can even the pressure out on the other side. This one might need a clamping call also. Just make sure it's all even. All right. I could go either way with this, but I'm just gonna make it easier to access my turn here, so I just flip it around. All right, so that should be plenty strong. The nice thing about this PVA glue, tight bond, you know, there's lots of different kinds, but it's stronger than the wood itself that it's gluing. So if I try to break these apart, I would probably break the wood before I broke the glue joint between them, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I've got a high spot in the middle again, like I did last time. I don't know if you can see that. So I'm going to put another clamping call on there, and I'm unfortunate enough to have, like I said, 8 million pieces of wood laying around in my shop. Like that. I'm gonna go cut this in half so I have a 2. It's gonna be loud. Need some hearing protection for my cameraman. Camera woman, sorry. This shows how clean my shop is. So as long as it's close, I don't need a super long. Close enough. All right. And my middle one's a little bit in my way, so I'm going to scoot it over so I can reach, put my call right in the center. Okay. There's one. Grab my next set of clamps. You can use C-clamps too for these anyway, because you're only going through a little thin area, so I probably don't want to glue this wood block to my bench. it's got quite a bow to it. So I'm really gonna crank this down. Hopefully it's my plywood's strong enough to keep it all square. It seems a lot better. Let's give it a shot. Oh yeah. See, now it's all nice and flat. No wobble. Cool. So now we just need to let them dry for an hour and bless you. And then we'll come back and I'll show you how to glue these all up. All right, it's been about 2 to 3 hours since I glued these up. I took off all the clamps and now I have two panels with the fingers on them. Just glued the fingers up so you don't have to cut them. And now what you would do is, first of all, test and see if they fit together. Just obviously along, you can see they just go long to short, short to long. And if you can check and make sure there's no glue in the way or anything. If things aren't fitting together very well. It's a little bit tight, but you can take a little mallet too. Just carefully. Like so. And there you can see the ends poking out on either side. And like I said, I made these slightly longer than, or the gap slightly longer than the pieces are thick. That way I can sand the edges and then you can make them nice and flush. That way I don't have to sand the whole thickness down to make them flush. So I suggest you don't put 2 together until you have all 4, and then you can put all 4 together. So you can take your square and make sure they're square all 4 sides. You can use your other square too. Check the outside. And just make sure it's all, once you're all ready to go, you can clamp them up, one top, one bottom, with 4 sides, and then you can do both sides. That way they can get them all together and just keep making sure it's square. But once you have it together, it should be pretty strong. And you didn't have to use your table saw with a jig or your router or anything like that to make fingers. And you could do this with, 1/4-inch ones if you wanted to. It'd be pretty small. Be a lot of cutting, but it's another way to make finger joints. Kind of like this one I made. I think those are about 1/2 inch. I don't know if you can see 1/2 inch pieces of wood I made. And I made them all stick out a little long, and I rounded the edges so you can kind of have a little detail on the end for the different fingers. Kind of fun. And that's it. Thanks, YouTube. This has been Josh Pruitt.